I'm Deepika Prakash from National Law University, Delhi, and this presentation is about report writing under the subject of research methodology. In every research in any field, there are certain basic steps that every researcher has to take. First step that a researcher takes is defining a research problem. Once he defines a research problem, he goes on to review the available literature on the topic. After reviewing the literature, he goes on to formulate the hypothesis or the research question as the case may be. Subsequently, he goes on to create a research design for the entire research to be taken forward. On the basis of this research design, he goes on to collect the data. This data, once collected with the help of various data tools, is then processed, analyzed, and subsequently interpreted. Once the interpretation of data done, generalizations are drawn, the final step in the entire research process is taken, which is making the report on the research. Now, what is a report? In every research, there is a research report. This report is the formal, logical presentation of the research conducted. No research is complete without a research report. As the culmination of the research investigation, the report contains within itself a logical and coherent explanation of the various stages of the research and how the conclusion was arrived at. Now, it is made to convey to the interested persons the whole result of the study in sufficient detail and to determine himself the validity of the conclusions that are drawn. The ability to write an effective report is one of the most useful skills a researcher can acquire. The arrangement of ideas and interpretation of the findings is of utmost importance, equivalent to the entire research process itself. Now, what are the significance of a report? The first significance of a report is that it conveys knowledge to the concerned persons in the field of the research. Second, it properly presents the findings for further utilization as well as recommendations. The report further gives impetus to further research in the concerned knowledge area, and it helps to re-examine the validity of the generalization drawn by the researcher after the report has been submitted. Now, there are various kinds of reports depending upon the object of the report and the area. There are business reports, project reports, there are dissertations, theses, there are various inquiry reports. There are also legal research report. This presentation deals with how a legal research report is written. Now, what is a legal research report? It is a report which deals specifically with a legal problem. Such a report is not a complete description of the work done by the researcher. It is only a brief statement of the most significant fact that are necessary for the understanding the generalizations drawn by the investigator. Now, there are some basic guidelines for every report writing. First guideline that a report writer must keep in mind is the knowledge of the research material. The writer must have the comprehensive and adequate knowledge of the research area. It forms the backbone of the entire research process and is of vital importance at the time of analysis and interpretation of report writing. Second guideline is organizing of the research material. The material collected must be organized and the notes made on them manageable and properly arranged with sufficient information which may be required. The research information must be logically analyzed and represented in the correct sequence of time or occurrence. Another guideline for the researcher is that he should do a continuous report reflective thinking. Researcher constantly reflects on the material and the data collected for a more comprehensive legal report. He should make rough drafts, which will help him with research interpretation and generalizations in a more accurate and relevant form, and will also help him test the research questions and the hypothesis. Another guideline that a researcher must follow is to rewrite and polish the rough drafts. Careful revision of the drafts helps in checking the development of the arguments in the report, representation of the material as well as the cohesiveness of the entire report. Preparation of the final bibliography. It is essential that from the very beginning of the research, the researcher must maintain a bibliography of the literature read, consulted and incorporated in the research process. This bibliography is generally appended to the research project. It should be arranged alphabetically and be divided into various parts like names of the books, articles, reports and legislations consulted. Another guideline that the researcher must follow is footnoting and headnotes. The researcher must, wherever citing another author's work, make due footnotes or endnotes to add authenticity and reference to the report. There are various methods of writing bibliography and footnotes, like the Blue Book method, which is basically from the Harvard School, and the Oscola method, which is of the Oxford School. Now coming to the structure of a report. The following discussion of the structure is a general discussion of any report, not specifically a legal report. Pauline V. Young summarized the contents of a good report as following. First, introduction. The introduction must be clear-cut statements as to the nature of the study, aims, source of information must be mentioned, scope of the study must be mentioned in the introduction, and this altogether will make an introduction of a report. Second, brief statement of the working hypothesis which guided the study. Third, explicit definitions of the units of study. Fourth, brief statement of techniques used in the study. For example, types of observations used and conditions under which observations were made, types of schedules formulated and conditions under which information was secured, types of case history data secured, their sources, manner of presentation and preliminary analysis made. Then sampling procedure and conditions of selection and testing for appropriateness, representativeness, statistical procedure, sources of statistical data conditions under which they were obtained, and types of scaling techniques used. Fifth, brief description of experimental treatment of data and techniques in experiments. Sixth, the major findings. Seventh, major conclusions reached about findings. Eighth, special remarks. For example, problems encountered in gathering the data, classifying them, analyzing them, possible discrepancies in the data collected. Then suggestions to subsequent investigators on the same topic in the same context. Bibliographical references found useful in the study with annotations. Appendices might include sample questions, transcriptions, sheets, sample interviews, and the likes. Now coming to a structure of a legal report, which is the topic of our presentation. A sound legal report contains the following parts. First, there should be a preliminary part. Second, there should be the main body of the report. And third, the references. Following is a brief description on all three of them. Preliminary title. Here is an example of how the title page should be. The title page is the cover of the report and the first thing that the targeted readers come in contact with. It indicates the main theme or the title of the study. The title should always be appropriate and attractive. The title page may also contain the name of the researcher and the date. Then comes the preface or the acknowledgement. This contains the acknowledgement to all the people whom the writer is indebted to for guidance and assistance. Next comes the foreword. The foreword involves a brief synopsis and importance of the content. Subsequently comes the table of cases, which contains the list of cases cited within the report. Then under preliminary comes the list of abbreviations. These are embodying all the abbreviations used in the report subsequently with their full forms. Then comes in the preliminary part of the report the table of contents. The table of content mentions the major division of the report and their respective page number. And finally comes the table of maps, diagrams, figures, etc. if they have been used in the report. Moving on to the main body of the report. The main text provides the complete outline of the research report along with all details. Title of the research study is repeated at the top of the first page of the main text and then follows the other details on the pages numbered consecutively, beginning with the second page. Each main section of the report should begin on a new page. The main text of the report should have the following sections. Firstly, in the main body, there should be an introduction. The purpose of an introduction is to give a background so as to make clear to the readers why the problem, the research problem here, was considered worth investigating. Then the main body should contain the methodology. This represents the research design and method used in carrying out the research. It should give exact meaning of the measurements or terms or variables used, selection of sampling, universe selected, tools of data collection, hypothesis, etc. Next part of the main body is the review of literature. Here, the report writer assesses the important and relevant already existing literature on the problem. The rationale of the review is to develop upon the conceptual framework and the background of the research, which will become the source of formulation of the hypothesis subsequently. Next part of the main body is the analysis and interpretation. This is the most crucial part of the report. In it, the data which has been collected is processed, analyzed and interpreted, and various generalizations and inferences are drawn. There must be clarity and continuity in the presentation of the text and the result that follows in the main body. The next part of the main body of the report is the findings and recommendations. Under findings and recommendations, a detailed presentation of the findings of the study with supporting data in the form of tables and charts together with a validation of result is the next step in the writing of the main text of the report. This generally comprises the main body of the report extending over several chapters. All relevant results must find a place in this report. Towards the end of the main text, the researcher should aim to put down the research the results of his research clearly and precisely. He should state the implication that flow from the result of the study. It should then state the recommendations. The next part of the main body of a legal research report is the conclusion or the summary. The main text of the report must end with the summary of the report or the conclusions drawn from the findings. The final part is the references. References have appendices. Appendices should also be enlisted in respect of all technical data such as questionnaire, sample information, mathematical derivations and the like ones. A simple appendix should be headed appendix in bold and centered on the page in capitals without punctuation and 3-line space below the heading. Each appendix is numbered and stated on a new page. Appendices should be listed in the table of content together with page numbers. Appendices may be placed between the final chapter and the bibliography or immediately after bibliography. At the end of a legal research report, all the consulted sources of data, whether preliminary or secondary references, books, articles, reports, unpublished material, etc., must be listed in a bibliography. The purpose of a bibliography is to provide cross-reference as well as authenticity to the report. It should always be in an alphabetical order. Now, the style of writing bibliography depends upon whether there is already a prescribed form, as in the case of a dissertation or the thesis under a university, or the researcher can adopt any style. Some of the common ones are the Blue Book, which is the Harvard form of citation, and the OSCOLA, which is the Oxford University prescribed citation. Now, let's go on to see how to cite legal material. Now, in case of an authored book by a single author, the citation must always be in this sequence. First, the name of the author, then the title of the book, the page number if referring to a specific page or pages, and then the publisher. Along with the publisher, the name of publication, the edition or the year of publication. Here is an example of it, like MP Jain's Indian constitutional law has been cited here. Coming to citation made of a book written by two authors. Now, in this, the sequence must be that the names of the authors are first mentioned, then the title of the book along with the page number if referring to the specific page or pages, then the publisher, name of publication, the edition, the year of publication. Here is an example of it. Now, what happens when multiple authors, let's say more than two authors, book is being cited? Under it, the use of term et al. Is used. The name of the first author is only mentioned, and after his name, the term et al. Is written. Then the title of the book, the page number if referring to specific page or pages, and then the publisher, place of publication, edition, year of publication. Here is an example of it. Now, how to cite an edited book? When a book is edited by a single author, then the name of the editor is mentioned first. Along with it, in bracket, ed is mentioned. Then the title of the book, the page number if referring to specific pages or page, then the publisher, the place of publication, the edition and the year. Following is an example of such an edited book being cited. Coming to case laws. Now, how one cites a case law? In India, we have number of journals which report cases in various courts in India. The citation of case laws vary accordingly. However, the broad citation idea is that firstly, the name of the case is mentioned, then the journal name, for example, AIR, Supreme Court cases, then the volume number, the year, the court and the page number. Following is an example of a case cited in the AIR and in SCC. This is an example of a case cited from the US. There the citation is slightly different. Now, how do we cite an act? The act is written in a research report in its full form. That is, for example, if we are citing the Competition Act 2002, then we mention it as the Competition Act 2002 along with the serial number of the year in which it was enacted, that is Act 12 of the year 2003. Now, when we are citing a report, then we mention the authority whose report it is, number of report, name and the year of publication. Like here in the example, we have cited a report of Law Commission. So, we have written it as Law Commission of India, then the report number, which is 144th report on conflicting judicial decisions pertaining to the Code of Civil Procedure, the year and the page number. Now, how do we cite an article or an essay? In a report, an article or an essay published in a journal or a periodical is cited in such a form. First, the name of the author of the article is mentioned, then the title of the essay within inverted commas, then volume number of the journal, then name of the journal in abbreviations, and then finally the page number and in the bracket the year of publication. Here is an example of the same. Coming to citation of an editorial from a newspaper. How do we cite an editorial from a newspaper? These are cited by firstly mentioning the title of the editorial within inverted comma, the name of the newspaper and the date. Now, here in example we have written Short Circuited Times of India, August 2 is the date and the year of publication. Now, how does one cite an unpublished work? For example, a thesis of a person. Under it, the citation is written in such a form that firstly the name of the researcher is written, then the title of the dissertation or the thesis as the case may be, along with the year in which the thesis was written. Then the unpublished PhD thesis needs to write the name of the university or the organization. Following is an example of it. Now, how do we cite a website? If the website gives the information as to when it was last modified, then it must be cited. If not, one must cite the date of the visiting of the library. Here is the example of it. In case it has been modified, then in the end of the citation, in the bracket, we write last modified on such and such date, and in case it has not been modified or it is not mentioned, then in the bracket we write visited on the date. Now, there are certain precautions that one has to keep in mind while writing a report. Following are these. First is the length of a report. The length of a report varies depending on the nature and type of report. However, the researcher must keep in mind that the report must not be too long. Otherwise, the researcher, the readers of the research may lose interest in it. Second precaution that one should keep in mind while writing the report is that the report must be interesting and engaging. The style and language of the report must be simple, yet able to maintain the interest of the readers. Next precaution is the diagrammatic representation. The researcher must add graphs, charts, tables for the various findings so that reader is able to quickly discern them. Another precaution that must be kept in mind by the researcher while writing a report is pre-planning of the report. Keep the objectives of the research in mind. The researcher must pre-plan the layout and the structure of the report for it to be in accordance with the nature, scope and finding of the research. Next it should be grammatically sound. The report must be free from grammatical and punctuational errors. All footnotes, abbreviation, etc. must be clearly mentioned. The sixth precaution that one should bear in mind while writing a report is maintaining logical flow throughout the report. It is necessary for the clarity and better communication of the report that there must be logical flow of the subject matter in the report, without which it will be difficult for the readers to decipher it. Another precaution that must always be kept in mind by the researcher is that the report must be under all cost original. Every report must strive to be as original in its research findings, styles of presentation and knowledge building. This contributes greatly to the future legal research work in the same field. Another precaution that is to be kept in mind is mention further implications of the report. Towards the end of the report, the researcher must mention the further implications of the said work, like in the policy implementation or let's say jurisprudential contribution, etc. Another important precaution to be kept in mind at the time of writing the report is bibliography must be comprehensive. Exhaustive bibliography must be mentioned at the end of the report. Another precaution that must be kept in mind while writing a report is the objectives, nature, technique and limitations be stated. In the introduction part of the report, the researcher must mention the objectives, scope, nature, technique, tools as well as limitations of the research conducted. This makes the report more wholesome as well as accurate. In the conclusion of the report writing presentation, I would like to say that report writing is the most important part of research. It is the end product of the entire research activity. It communicates to the reader the research that has been conducted. The report that has been prepared by him, therefore, must be always simple and coherent to justify the findings and explain the research substantively. Hence, in this presentation, we saw how to write an effective report. Thank you.